carry you. Let us pause here. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who does not need to speak loudly to command attention? A woman whose energy fills the room, not because she demands it, but because she is rooted in herself. That presence is not accidental. It is the result of cultivated inner language. A woman who speaks to herself with intention radiates silent authority. She walks into a room and says nothing. But the way she says nothing changes everything. Relationships are the most vivid mirrors of our inner language. Think about how you behave when you feel insecure. How do you act when you think to yourself, I might leave, or maybe I'm not what he really wants? Your nervous system tightens. You begin to people please. You become reactive or overly accommodating. Not because the relationship is flawed, but because the internal language you rehearsed has trained your body to move from fear. Now think about how you behave when you feel whole. When your inner language has been steady. When you remind yourself, I am enough, even in silence, or if he doesn't value me, he was never mine to lose. In that space, your energy is different. You set boundaries with grace. You speak less, but every word holds weight. You allow space for connection without abandoning yourself for approval. These shifts don't start with strategy. They begin in silence, with the unseen script running in your own mind. What you say to yourself is not just a personal matter. It's relational. It determines the type of partners you attract, how you tolerate mistreatment, how you respond to conflict, and whether your love feels like desperation or dignity. In one coaching session with a woman in her 50s, she broke down not because someone had insulted her, but because she caught herself saying, "You're too old to start over." That single phrase had built an entire prison around her. It had kept her from dating again. It had made her second guess her wardrobe, her laughter, even her dreams. She had internalized the sentence so deeply that she mistook it for truth. When we explored where it came from, she realized it was her mother's voice, softly passed down through subtle discouragements over decades. Not malicious, just inherited, but still powerful. We carry many voices that are not ours. So the question becomes, whose voice are you repeating? Who authored the self-talk script you now perform unconsciously every day? The beauty of awareness is that the moment you recognize a thought as inherited, you begin the work of rewriting it. Not with force, not with denial, but with gentle discipline. And this is where the first 3 days of change can become sacred. For just 3 days you observe. You listen to yourself, not to react, but to understand. And then you introduce new language. Language that supports the woman you are becoming, not the fears you've inherited. The shift is not in saying, I love myself, once and expecting magic. The shift is in repeating language that stabilizes your nervous system and creates safety within your own body. When you speak to yourself in a calm, grounded way, your body stops preparing for war. You are no longer fighting for love. You are living in it. Let's consider how this plays out in small relational moments. A woman is dating someone new. He takes a few hours to respond to her message. Her inner language kicks in. He's pulling away. I knew it. I'm not worth prioritizing. Those thoughts create anxiety. Her breathing becomes shallow. She sends another message, this time tinged with neediness. Not because she is needy, but because her inner language convinced her that silence equals rejection. Now imagine that same scenario, but her inner voice says, there is space in love. I am safe even in the unknown. She waits, she breathes, she responds with clarity instead of fear. The outcome may be the same, but her energy is preserved. Her dignity remains intact. Her power is untouched. Inner words shape outer behavior. Another woman, married for years, finds herself always apologizing. even when things aren't her fault. She says sorry for her emotions, for asking questions, for needing rest. Her internal language is, "Don't be a burden." That belief was formed in childhood. She was praised for being low maintenance. Now as an adult, she is exhausted, resentful, and disconnected. When we examined her self-talk, she realized she never allowed herself to express desire without guilt. Her body was trained to shrink in relationships. It began with one sentence, and it became a lifestyle. Changing self-talk is not just about affirmations on sticky notes. It's about returning to your own authority and then deciding that your internal dialogue must reflect your inherent worth. For 3 days, if you speak to yourself as if you are worthy, your actions will slowly follow. You will notice when someone interrupts you, and you will correct it. You will stop entertaining conversations that devalue you. You will no longer betray yourself just to belong. This is emotional discipline. And now we enter the second, even more subtle layer, emotional energy. Most people think emotional energy is how loudly someone expresses themselves. But in truth, emotional energy is what you broadcast, even when you're silent. It is the feeling people get when they sit near you. It is the safety or discomfort you carry without words. And it is entirely shaped by your relationship with yourself. Let's reflect. Have you ever sat next to a woman who radiates calm, even if she's just sipping her tea in silence? Or walked past someone and felt tension in the air, even before they spoke? That is emotional energy. It's not invisible to others. We are all wired to sense it, and we often mistake it for vibes or gut feeling. But much of that is simply the unconscious interpretation of someone's inner dialogue. If your self-talk is chaotic, anxious, or filled with self-doubt, people around you will feel unsettled. They may not know why, but your presence will not invite intimacy. It will provoke caution. On the other hand, when you speak to yourself with grounded strength, when you tell yourself, "I am allowed to take up space," or "My voice matters," even if it shakes, your body calibrates, your energy steadies, your nervous system communicates openness, not threat, and others begin to feel safe in your presence. This is especially important in relationships. Emotional energy is often the difference between a relationship that deepens and one that deteriorates. Men, for example, are biologically sensitive to emotional cues. Evolutionarily, they are wired to respond to the emotional state of a woman, her facial expressions, her tone, her energy. If a woman's inner dialogue is filled with fear and insecurity, it subtly leaks into her communication. She may appear clingy, overly critical, or disconnected, not because she is any of those things, but because her energy is asking, "Am I enough?" That silent question shifts the dynamic. It places emotional pressure on the relationship, which often leads to distance. But when a woman speaks to herself with confidence and clarity, even in uncertain moments, her presence signals emotional stability. She becomes a safe place, not just for others, but for herself. And that safety becomes magnetic, not performative, not manipulative, simply real. There's a story of a woman who, after years of inner chaos, decided to begin her mornings differently. For just 3 days, she began each morning by placing her hand on her chest and saying aloud, "I speak peace into this body. I speak value into this soul. I trust myself more than I fear uncertainty." At first, it felt mechanical, awkward, but by the second day, she noticed something unexpected. She didn't feel the usual panic when she saw unread messages. She didn't feel the need to overshare in conversations. Her words were fewer. Her presence was stronger. She had changed nothing externally, but internally, her language was becoming her power. Emotional energy begins with the discipline of self-directed truth. Not the truth of your trauma, but the truth beyond it. The part of you that existed before the heartbreak, before the silence, before the need to prove yourself. That self is still within you, and it listens carefully to how you speak. There is great responsibility in knowing this, because once you realize that your internal dialogue is shaping your outer experience, you can no longer afford to be careless with your words, not even the ones no one else hears. You must become intentional. You must become selective. And most of all, you must become silent enough to hear which voice is your own and which ones were borrowed from a world that never truly saw you. The language you use with yourself will either open the doors of connection or keep them locked with stories that no longer serve you. Every time you speak to yourself, you are either building a bridge toward your highest self or reinforcing a wall around your wounded one. So for 3 days, speak to yourself as if your emotional well-being depends on it, because it does. Speak not just kindly, but clearly. Speak as if you are retraining your nervous system to trust your own presence again. Speak as if the way you love yourself teaches others how to love you, not through instruction, but through resonance. And watch how the world slowly, subtly, begins to respond. There is a quiet but powerful truth that most people never take time to examine. Your mind does not seek truth. It seeks familiarity. Whatever you repeat often enough, your mind begins to accept as reality. The repetition of a thought, even one that is harmful, eventually becomes part of your identity, not because it's accurate, but because it's rehearsed. You are not walking through life guided by facts. You are being led by what your nervous system has learned to expect. And what it expects is shaped by what you tell yourself again and again. This is why a woman who repeatedly tells herself, "I'm not lovable," will see rejection where there is silence. She will hear criticism in neutral tones. She will anticipate betrayal in moments of absence. Her inner world has rehearsed a script of abandonment, and her brain, loyal and efficient, interprets everything through that lens. The mind believes what is familiar, not what is good, not what is wise, what is familiar. This is why change feels unnatural at first. It is not because the new is false, it's because the old is practiced. And what is practiced becomes comfortable, even if it is painful. If you have been speaking to yourself from a place of fear for years, then calm self-talk will feel foreign. You will resist it, not because it's ineffective, but because it disrupts the rhythm your nervous system is used to. You will doubt kind words to yourself. You will argue with the voice that says, "You are worthy." Because the voice that says, "You are too much," has been louder for longer. There is a reason ancient disciplines teach the same lesson. The beginning of transformation is not force, it is awareness. The first step is noticing the tone you use with yourself, and then observing how your body reacts when you try to change that tone. A woman who has lived with internal criticism for decades cannot switch to self-love overnight. Her nervous system has learned to survive in a state of tension. She will need time and she will need consistency. This is why the 3-day practice matters. When you commit to changing the way you speak to yourself for just 3 days, you are not trying to erase the past. You are introducing a new rhythm to your emotional body. You are gently showing your nervous system that calm is not a threat, that worthiness is not arrogance, that love does not have to be earned through self-sacrifice. The science of neuroplasticity shows us that the brain can change at any age, but it requires repetition. New neural pathways only begin to form when old ones are interrupted with consistency. This is not about speaking loudly to yourself. It is about speaking regularly. Whispered words of truth spoken daily are more powerful than dramatic declarations that are never repeated. There was a woman who had always felt invisible in her relationships. She didn't grow up in a loud household. She wasn't abused. But she was overlooked. Her parents rarely asked about her feelings. Her opinions were met with indifference. No one called her stupid, but no one told her she was wise either. So she grew up interpreting neutrality as a lack of worth. By the time she entered adult relationships, she found herself afraid to express needs. Every time she tried to set a boundary, her chest tightened. Her voice shook, not because she didn't know what she deserved, but because her brain was trained to equate attention with rejection. When she started her 3-day self-talk practice, she didn't try to affirm grand ideas. She started with this simple sentence: I am allowed to speak. She repeated it in the mirror. She whispered it in traffic. She mouthed it silently before conversations. The first day, her body tensed. The second day, she cried. The third day, she set a boundary with someone who had been crossing her limits for months. Her body still trembled, but her voice didn't break. You do not need to convince yourself of something big. You need to repeat something true. If your brain believes the familiar, then your job is to make safety familiar, make calm familiar, make self-respect familiar. In relationships, this is life-altering. Imagine what shifts in your connection when your inner voice is trained in calm authority. A woman who tells herself, I don't need to rush this, becomes a partner who doesn't cling in conflict. A woman who tells herself, I can choose how I respond, becomes someone who no longer argues to win, but to understand. These aren't just personality traits. These are trained responses, learned habits, the result of repeated internal messages that created emotional flexibility. Most people wait for evidence from the outside to change their beliefs inside. But the real mastery lies in doing the opposite. You begin speaking as if the new belief is already true. You say, I am enough, even when you feel unsure. You say, I am safe, even when the outcome is unknown. And slowly, the inner world becomes a container strong enough to hold peace. Even when the outer world is unpredictable, this shift creates a new foundation for all emotional connections. When your inner voice is steady, you stop asking others to stabilize you. You no longer require constant reassurance. You are not reactive to every small change in tone or attention. You become less dependent on external validation because the internal validation has become consistent. This does not mean you stop needing love. It means you stop needing love to fill a void that your own words are capable of tending. This creates depth in partnership. It makes room for connection that is rooted, not needy. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood because you understand yourself. You are no longer desperate to be chosen because you have chosen yourself first, and others feel that. They sense it. They trust it. There is a kind of woman who can sit in silence and not rush to fill it. Who can feel discomfort and not turn it into panic. Who can be in love without abandoning her own voice. That woman did not arrive there by accident. She practiced speaking to herself with such calm repetition that it became her nature, not performance, practice. This practice, however, often begins in pain. Most women begin the journey of changing their self-talk after betrayal, loss, or disconnection. Pain becomes the signal that the old language no longer fits the life they want to live. And in that sacred disruption, something new begins. A whisper that says, I don't want to feel this way anymore, becomes the first act of rebellion against the familiar lies. You do not have to wait for pain to make this shift. You can begin from wisdom, from the understanding that your internal world is your home, and no one else is responsible for its language but you. A young woman once shared a practice that changed her inner dialogue. Every morning, she would write down the sentence she most feared hearing from someone she loved. and then she would write the truth beneath it. One morning she wrote, "You're not worth fighting for." Then she sat in silence and wrote, "My worth is not determined by someone else's effort." That sentence became her anchor for the day. When her partner became distant, she didn't spiral. She returned to her truth. That single sentence, rehearsed, repeated, remembered, became her emotional lifeline. This is the power of gentle interruption. You do not need to change your entire life in one moment. You only need to interrupt the familiar sentence with one new word. And do it again tomorrow. This is how the brain learns. This is how relationships heal. This is how a woman transforms without force. There will be moments when the old voice returns. That is normal. Familiar patterns do not vanish in a day. But when it returns, you are not obligated to follow it. You can watch it, thank it for what it tried to protect, and then choose differently. You can say, "That used to be me, but I speak differently now." This small act of awareness rewires your emotional response. Over time, you will begin to notice something beautiful. The new sentences will become second nature. You will no longer have to think, "What should I say to myself?" Because the voice of clarity, of calm, of inner respect will be the first to speak. And in your relationships, this will change everything. When conflict arises, you will no longer ask, "What does this mean about me?" You will ask, "What is actually happening here?" You will respond to situations, not react to triggers. You will speak with the tone of someone who is not afraid of being left, because you have not left yourself. And that energy changes the entire emotional climate of your life. You are not asking the world to make you feel whole. You are training your own mind to believe that wholeness is your birthright. This belief, repeated for 3 days, begins the shift. The voice inside you is not fixed. It is flexible. It responds to practice. And when your internal voice becomes your ally, your relationships become your mirror, not your battlefield. So you speak softly, gently, consistently, not to impress, not to prove, but to build a new familiarity. One where love is not begged for, but breathed. One where safety is not chased, but created. And one where your own voice is the first place you go when the world grows loud. You cannot become calm by calling yourself chaotic. A woman cannot step into her power by constantly speaking from her pain. There is a sacred alignment between the language you use internally and the version of yourself you are becoming. Every time you speak, even in the privacy of your mind, you are casting a vote for the kind of woman you will be tomorrow. If your words do not energy of that future self, then no amount of action will bring her closer. True change begins with language. When a woman desires transformation, when she longs to feel emotionally grounded, relationally whole, and deeply respected, she must first look at her inner dialogue. Not the loud proclamations, but the quiet sentences she speaks in moments of doubt, the ones she doesn't even question anymore. These are the words that shape her energy, and your energy is more honest than your voice. There's a woman who says she wants peace. She meditates. She lights candles. She reads the right books. But when she's alone with her thoughts, she says, "Why am I still like this? I should have figured it out by now. I'm always the one who's too emotional." She doesn't realize it, but her self-talk is reinforcing the very identity she's trying to outgrow. Her actions reach for peace, but her language rehearses chaos. This internal contradiction creates resistance, exhaustion, and confusion. And over time, it makes her believe that change isn't possible. But the truth is, her soul isn't resisting growth. It's just confused by her inconsistency. You cannot call yourself weak and expect your relationships to treat you like a pillar of strength. You cannot criticize your sensitivity and expect others to handle it with care. You cannot describe yourself as broken and expect love to find wholeness in you. This is not about lying to yourself. It's about aligning with a deeper truth. The truth that you are becoming, not the one you are escaping. The process of aligning self-talk with your future self requires emotional discipline. You must be willing to say no to thoughts that were once comfortable. You must challenge the sentences that feel true only because you've practiced them for years. And most importantly, you must develop the courage to sound new to yourself. There is a kind of woman who speaks to herself with such precision that her presence becomes a statement. She doesn't just appear calm.